Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to crack open a book that absolutely blew people's minds when it came out, Freakonomics. Seriously, get ready to look at the world in a totally different way. Okay, so let's just jump right in with a question. And yeah, it sounds a little like the start of a bad joke, but trust me, it gets right to the core of what this book is all about. The answer? It might just change how you see, well, pretty much everything. So to get to the bottom of that riddle, we've got to meet the guy behind Freakonomics, an economist named Stephen Levitt.
Now, Levitt, he is not your typical economist. He's not interested in the stock market or inflation rates. Nope. He thinks of economics as this amazing toolbox, and he uses those tools like a detective, to go out and solve the little mysteries of our everyday lives.
And that right there is the core idea. The whole Freakonomics mindset is about stripping away all our assumptions, all our ideas about how the world should work, and just looking at how it actually works. And how do we do that? By following the data wherever it leads. Okay, so let's put this mindset into action. The first, and maybe the most important tool in the box, is understanding incentives. I mean, they're the cornerstone of, modern life. They're these hidden forces that really explain why people do the things they do. Which brings us right back to our big question. What do school teachers and sumo wrestlers have in common? Well, it turns out that a teacher who's under a ton of pressure to get good test scores and a sumo wrestler who's desperate to keep his high rank, they're facing a very similar, very powerful incentive. And in both situations, the data shows something fascinating. When the stakes get high enough, some people, they're going to cheat. So how can you possibly tell from the data? Well, take a look at student 14 here. Their score skyrockets from a 3.8 to a 7.1 in 6th grade. Wow, that's an amazing jump, right? But then, the very next year, it plummets back down to a 5.6. That kind of pattern, when you see it across a whole bunch of students in the same class, that's basically a statistical fingerprint. It's the sign of a teacher, let's just say, helping out a little too much with the answers. You know, this whole idea of hidden motives and incentives, it leads us perfectly into the next big tool in the Freakonomics kit, the power of information. Information asymmetry. Okay, sounds complicated, but it's a really simple idea. It just means that one person in a deal knows a lot more than the other. Think about your doctor, or your mechanic, or your real estate agent. They're the expert, right? They know way more than you do. And that knowledge, well, that gives them a massive advantage. So, how in the world could the Ku Klux Klan and your friendly neighborhood real estate agent have anything in common? Well, it all comes back to that information advantage. The KKK, they used all these secret codes and rituals to build up this mystique of fear and power. A real estate agent, they use their insider knowledge, what the market's really doing, what buyers are thinking, to steer a deal in a way that's good for them, which isn't always what's best for you. But here's the cool part. Technology can totally blow that up. Take a look at this. Before the internet, if you wanted to buy term life insurance, good luck. It was a confusing mess. But then, websites popped up that let you compare prices instantly, and just like that, poof, the information advantage was gone. And what happened? Prices absolutely cratered. We're talking about saving people $1 billion a year. That's the power of leveling the playing field. All right, now we get to what might be the most controversial, the most provocative tool in the whole Freakonomics arsenal. And that's using data to absolutely demolish conventional wisdom. You know, all those things that everybody just knows are true. So, picture this. It's the 1990s, and all of a sudden, crime rates in the US just start falling off a cliff. It was dramatic, and nobody saw it coming. Of course, all the experts jumped in with their theories. The economy's booming, the policing is better, new gun laws. And you know what? They all sounded perfectly logical. So pretty soon, that became the story everyone believed. But when Levitt actually started digging into the data, he found a huge problem. Yeah, some of those things had a tiny effect, but none of them, not even all of them combined, could explain just how massive this crime drop was. It just didn't add up. The conventional wisdom, it had to be wrong. So he kept digging, looking for something else in the data that could explain it. And what he found was, it was a shocking correlation. The crime drop started almost precisely 18 years after a huge event in 1973, the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion across the country. Okay, so what's the theory? And this is the really controversial part. The data showed that the women who were most likely to seek an abortion were often in tough situations, poor, unmarried, maybe very young, And statistically, children born into those circumstances are at a much higher risk of becoming criminals later in life. Now, Levitt's point wasn't about morality at all. It was just a cold, hard look at the numbers. His theory was that the massive crime drop was an unforeseen, unintended consequence of this huge social shift from a generation earlier. And this kind of thinking, using data to challenge our deepest held beliefs, you can apply it to pretty much anything, even something as personal, as emotional, as raising our kids. I mean, think about it. Parents obsess over all the things they do, right? Reading to their kids every night, buying all the right toys, moving to a good school district. We're all searching for that magic formula. But here's the shocker. The data says that what parents do has surprisingly little to do with how their kids turn out on Test Leader. What really, really matters is who the parents are. Are they educated? Are they successful? Is their life stable? It turns out who you are matters way more than what you do. So the takeaway is kind of radical. Maybe the best thing you can do for your kids is to focus on being the best version of yourself. And speaking of parenting, what about the very first thing a parent does? They give their child a name. Which brings us to this wild case study. There was this father in New York who was so convinced that a name determined your destiny that he named his sons, get this, Winner and Loser. So what happened? Well, Destiny had a sense of humor. Loser Lane, he grew up to become a successful police detective. And Winner Lane, he ended up with a huge criminal record, living a life of crime. So what's the point? It's that a name doesn't cause anything. A name doesn't make you a winner or a loser. A name is just a signal. It's a reflection of the parent's background, their education, their social circle, their aspirations. It tells you about the world that child was born into. And that is what really correlates with their future. And really, that brings us to the ultimate lesson of Freakonomics. This isn't about morality, about what's good or bad. It's about putting aside our feelings about how we want the world to work and using data to see how it actually works. It's a world driven by hidden incentives and the power of information. So that leaves us with one final thought for you. This way of thinking isn't just for economists. It's a tool you can use in your own life. So ask yourself, what piece of conventional wisdom do you just accept as true? What if you actually looked at the data? Go ahead, start digging. You never know what hidden side of your own world you might uncover.